Yes. Then we are live. Um, we're here talking with Kjetil about enabling you as value creator and need of decentralized identity. We don't need to do a whole lot of intro. You can do that yourself, Kjetil. And this is a very interesting subject, and you have been in the game for a long time. So I'll just hand it over to you, and you can listen to your presentation.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, I'm Kjetil Husveit, and I work in the company Boulder Technologies. I've been working there for about 2.5 years in a small department we call the Loon Lab. Um, and my focus the last decade has been, and still is, to help building a digital future that is beneficial for every individual. So this is just the latest project in that adventure. So the Loon Lab is a small internal group, and the name is inspired by a book called Loon Shots. And that book is about how to nurture the really crazy ideas and how to manage the phase transition from the lab to the franchise. And because both taking care of the crazy ideas and bringing them out in production is very important. So Boulder is a company that is very centered around philosophy. So it's helping our fellow humans to fulfill their lives, be active, be conscious about life, find a purpose. So in the Loon Lab, we try to find a way to implement this company philosophy and making small pilots to demonstrate how it may be done before we pass it to the franchise. And we ask ourselves different questions that forms the project we do, like what is the world conform to you, or what does it really mean to have control? Before I started working with Boulder, I did work with product recommendations quite some years ago, and at some point I realized that we're leaking a lot of information about ourselves, and this will become a problem. And when I started looking into it, it revealed that we're not even products in this industry. We're on a raw material for companies in a very lucrative business. So to mitigate the problem, when some solutions succeeds and become very valuable at some point, it will be bought by someone that not necessarily shares the original vision of the project. So I started with making a foundation to protect solutions that should not be sold to anyone. But the idea that what needs such protection has changed radically since I started it, but it's still there to. Oops, scheiße.
The share disappeared. The screen disappeared.
Yes, 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 yes. What? There. Yes. Sorry about that. Well, going on. Just a small second. What? Oh, I just had to. What happened there? Sorry. There. Okay, back again. So, how to ensure that we build a digital future that is beneficial for all individuals? And, of course, it starts with the individual. So what does it really mean to control your own data? it means a lot. You have to have control of all aspects of your data. And here I've not taken any position on what is your data or defined what is your data. But if you want to control it, it must be you must be certain that the data integrity is good. Availability must be there. Must be able to use it when you need it. If you're going to share it with others, you need some form of access control. When you're presenting yourself to others, you need to control how you present yourself, and you need to do all this on your terms. So the data is not under your control if you not at any point can decide to edit it or delete it. But of course, it's up to each individual to give up control, but that should be a conscious decision. So when going into this, controlling your own data it's an absolute need to have a decentralized identity. For example, social situations would be a lot more awkward if a company owned your face and you had to operate through their platform to squeeze out a smile. So controlling your identity does also represent a very real value that should belong to you. You can choose to share it with others, but in the foundation, you should be in control on how that value is handled. So the value of your identity should or must be under your control. And the identity is also the gateway to your digital entity. So it's a way to communicate with you and ask you for data in your much wider scope, which is your whole digital presence. And controlling your digital identity also gives you the control to present yourself when you're approaching different services or different persons or entities. And it's potentially giving less friction. You can operate in a password-free manner. It can potentially give high security by taking care of private keys yourself. You won't have to care about theft of password databases in the services you use. And at least as important, it leads to potentially more data sharing. But you can't build an ecosystem without normalized data. So this is a really huge issue. How can we be certain that we're talking about the same thing? And here there's a lot of very good initiatives like JSON, LD, RDF is interesting. We're combining some of these things with key parts. I'm going to explain that further. But it's very, very important that we have a standard that is flexible enough to support any use case that will pop up in the future. The standards we use must not be a limitation for what we're going to do. Then we have to change the standard. So we have created something we internally call a creation space. And we started out for having some structure where people can work together and create value. So, but if we describe it in more nerdy terms, it's like a mini program or microservice that can live in any address space, or we can say it's a computing kernel with routing and access control. So each creation space or the layer of creation spaces is described by a collection of interfaces or protocols. And each creation space should be able to answer certain questions. And one is on what terms can an identity connect? And if an identity is allowed to connect, what is granted? And what can we expect from the output feed from this creation space? And is it any way to query the creation space to know what can we do with it, this creation space, without actually knowing the insides of it? So it's everything is about the interfaces in the creation spaces. What happens inside the creation spaces is entirely up to the implementer. So to connect to a creation space, and we use the term connect instead of logging in or authenticating, and especially logging in. But to connect or let people connect, you have to set up a contract template, which is a structure that has some signatories. You have a set of conditions, and if those conditions are met, you have a set of grants, and the contract is valid for a certain duration. And this is very much like how normal analog contract is set up, but it's constructed in a way so we can automate the use of it, but it also supports, well, analog contracts. So when some identity tries to connect, we instance set the contract from the template. We check that all the conditions are met. If there's an unresolved issue, we issue a contract challenge, which should be tried to handle automatically. If it's not handled automatically, then we have to notify the user. But we try to do anything automatically, and that makes it possible to implement policies that can make sure that certain conditions are met without you having to respond to them personally. So yeah, and the client resolves the conditions, and then it signs the contract and send it to the publisher, and the publisher recheck that all conditions are met, and also check that the grants the grants given are working. So a condition can be several types. It could be a HTTP request that has to answer it with some certain answer, or it could be a grant to some data, or it could be a proof condition where we use verifiable credentials for accessing the proof. And we need some reference to know what we are asking for, and an optional constraint on the target. Yes, so when connecting, we start with the source, which is the creation space you have focused on, which can be on the phone, for example. And we need an identity, because an identity is used to define sameness within a cluster of creation spaces or within a service. So we start with the source, and then we ask the target or the wanted target creation space, or give me some metadata so I can be certain that we're talking the same language, and that you have some output that I actually can use. And we make an identity for that target, So we use one identity for a specific identity domain. So for all your private stuff, we use a private domain. If you connect to some service, we use that service as an identity domain. But of course, you can do whatever you like and manually load some ID or identity you want to use. But it's really constructed in a way so you can do this fully automatically, and it's very, or a design goal was to make it very mechanical. So it's no real intelligence in this. It's very constructed around a mechanical way to start it, and this has been done to keep complexity and complexity down, and then we can add more intelligence later on. So, and when we have decided that this is the target we want to connect to, then we use identity. We call method connect. If we are talking to a creation space where we need some utility creation space to talk to it, we insert that. And we resolve the contract. And the interesting thing with the connect context is we will always, for each connect, we will have the context of the source creation space, the target creation space, and the identity. So each connection will know the starting point of all this. And we use this in the contract, and we can make references to the identity, and then construct a key path pointing into the identity. And it's totally up to the implementation of the identity how it resolves that key path. But for example, if you have an identity.person, yeah, the identity should know that, well, I am an identity that's attached to some data where I can query the person data and load that. So when the contract is the example contract conditions to connect to a creation space, it could be some of the conditions could be that the person is more than 18 years, or you have to show a proof of admission, or the connecting entity, identity must be member of some specific creation space, or that the person that connects must set grant permission to his or her home address. And when you look at these things, they're very much conform to how verifiable credentials work. So we use verifiable credentials when we need some backing of a claim. And when the duration of our contract is expired, or if there are some conditions that may change, then the contract or the creation space that uses those conditions must ensure that it will receive an event or notification if some of the conditions in a contract changes. So here's how we started out with using key paths, but you can see that many of these things are defined in JSON LD, but the identity part is not. So we can use the reference identity, because that is part of every connection, and ask for data. And if some of this data is backed by a verifiable credential, and we ask, or we require that we have a proof of this, then we will return with a verifiable credential. But we could also ask the target creation space to reference to the organization that owns the creation space or the source, or if the identity connecting is a member of the employees in some creation space. So it's quite flexible. And it's very important that the creation space is autonomous. And that doesn't mean that it's intelligent. It just means that it has itself the responsibility to answer some incoming questions. And a creation space, by definition, you can implement it in any way you want, but in the protocol or interface definition, it has one feed output, and it can subscribe to 0 or as many subscriptions or as it wants to. And the identity involved in the transaction knows itself how to prove the ownership of a private key. So in the identity structure we're using, we're always attaching a public key. And when you ask that identity to prove yourself, the identity knows how to prove that identity is the owner of the private key. And to achieve that, then each address space must have at least one creation space resolver to look up creation spaces, so you can refer to the different kinds of creation spaces, and at least one identity vault. And the identity vault that holds the identities with the private keys must be certain that the private key is never leaving the identity vault. And this means that we can use hardware solutions like the Secure Enclave on iOS devices, or any other hardware solution to have a more secure handling of the private keys. So to just go through how this works. We can select what we call an experience, which is a reference to one or more. It can be a whole tree of creation spaces, and we attach that to the creation space you currently look at. And for each creation space we look up, we have to see in the identity vault if you have an identity that matches that identity domain. If it doesn't match it, we create a new identity with a new public private key pair. And we use the creation space resolver to look up the creation spaces, which can be referred to by name, or it can be referred to as an WebSocket address. So this is part of a small pilot I did, and I had different kinds of references, and some pointing over to a total another creation space. One service running as a Python service, and the creation space resolver identifies that, well, this creation space that we want to connect to is living on the other side of the network, so it inserts a cloud-rich creation space, which just encapsulates all the details about how to transport data over the network, and acts like a proxy. So for this creation space here, talking to this creation space acts like it's talking to any local creation space. It actually can't tell the difference between communicating to creation space in the same address space, or if it's on the other side of the network. Maybe, except that the latency is 1,000 times higher when we're communicating over the network. But in the same reference, we could point to another service running some Swift code, and these creation spaces were really just fetching some telemetry data from some surveillance cameras that did some body counting. But there it's recognized that this is on the other side of the network, and then inserts cloud creation space and talks to this one like it's a local creation space. And when the connection is accepted, then it can start the feed. And the feed is small packages of data with one definition. It's quite flexible what the content can be, but the encapsulating structure is very clearly defined. And as a bonus, we can add multiple creation space that can use the exact same functionality or type of functionality to talk to another device, another phone, or another IoT device that are available in the immediate vicinity. So this makes it possible to when you're physically meeting people, to very effectively share private keys and certain different verifiable credentials. So the use in creation spaces is really about spinning up a lot of small programs that handles one thing and preferably handles that very good. So each creation space only cares about the creation spaces it is directly connected to. And while it's possible to cram any functionality into a creation space, each one should focus on doing one thing, but do that really good. And that will make it very easy to reuse functionality in different configurations. So when it's necessary to bridge some network between your phone and a cloud service, then you just insert a creation space that has been made for exactly that. And it really acts as it lives in the same address space. So it's very easy to expand your scale up your network of creation spaces. And an important thing is if when connecting, you are also using your local identity into the foreign address space. But as each identity knows how to prove itself, all these creation spaces just asks the identity to prove that they are the owner of their public keys, and the identity will make sure that it actually communicates back to this address space, sign data with the private key, and returns the signed data back to the address space here. And we have been trying to build this in a way that is not dependent on using blockchains. And that's partly not because the blockchain is a bad technology, but it's being about puristic about controlling your own data, because once you write something to the blockchain, you give up some control over that data, even if that data is just an ID. But you're giving control away. So what can you do without blockchain? And it's probably a lot. And each entity can have its own list of trustees. So you can weigh them if you want to, and you can attach verifiable credentials to it. And if we combine these things with using physical contact to expand your trust network, it opens some interesting opportunities. So, for example, you can always ask your trusted network if you can trust a specific public key. For example, if you are a person that has established a customer relationship with a corporation, and that corporation gives this person some set of verifiable credentials, then when this person is registering at another corporation that has some knowledge of the first corporation, then we know that claims signed by this corporation, they're okay. We don't have to check anymore. These are good guys. So we will accept the credentials presented by this person. And we can also use this in a more social context. So if you're a person that so should I connect with this person, then you can see if is it possible to either from the person you're connecting to, or see if that person has left some traces in with your friends. For example, a verifiable credentials could be that, well, I met this guy at some venue somewhere. So, and yeah, that could be some data you can use to build a proof that okay, this is a guy that he knows some of the people I know. He has been on some of the same places. Has maybe some of the same interests. So okay, it seems like a good guy. And if you're meeting a person on the net that claims to have met you at some point, well, then you can always check with the public keys you have hoarded and stored for yourself. That this is actually the person I met. He has proven himself. So it really opens up a lot of opportunities that doesn't necessarily need a blockchain. So this is it's a long way to go to implement this everywhere. But the reason I'm optimistic about our common digital future is that doing it individual-centric or centered on an individual will lead to a much more valuable ecosystem than today's silo-based approach. And I think that the change will be very big. So this is our take on helping everybody for an opportunity to create value in our digital future and doing it on their own terms. Thanks for listening.
Cool. Thank you for telling. I get a lot of questions or thoughts around there's this question around terminology everywhere, right? You have the solid community, you have the SSI community or diff community.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is, where are things converging, you think?
Yeah, that's it's a difficult question, and it's, yeah, I would guess a work in progress. We perceive it in a way that we we have to talk together. Interoperability is really the key here, and we are moving in that direction. We are embracing. We are embracing all the standards we have the manpower to implement, which is not that much, but we have this layer that is using the established standards. So it's not something that is going to replace them. It's something that can, yeah, maybe it can make them work better. But we don't enforce anyone to do anything. But we're trying to move this from the lab into concrete projects, where we will see, okay, this has value, and we will try to get others that are interested in this functionality to use the same functionality. So it's really contributing solution, and we have yeah, quite some projects that we are starting with. I'm not going into that now, but I hope to really show that this has value, and it's a sensible way of doing it.
Yeah. This identity vault, is it inspiration from anywhere, or is it just a common term for key management?
No, it's inspired from web authentication. So it's almost the same protocol as web authentication. So it's a very simple simple protocol, but it's quite it seems to be quite secure. I'm not that skilled into cryptography and the low level details of security, but I'm using the public key to everywhere prove that when you present yourself as a specific identity, you always have to sign some data that you should, or at least how it's implemented is that the requester that wants to establish that you are the owner of the private key. That requester makes some blob of random data, preferably cryptologically secure random data, sends that to the identity that should prove itself, and return the signed data. And using elliptic curve cryptography, it's quite efficient, and it's not that much overhead to do it. So I'm using that in all connections. But when you are connected, then you're in, and we don't have to check until some other condition happen, or you have to reconnect or something. But web authentication is an inspiration for the protocol.
Yeah, cool. Is this creation space? I get a feeling of profile. Is it in the?
No, the creation space is yeah, at the foundation layer. It's a set of definitions on how each creation space should behave and communicate with each other. Above that layer, we have some general implementations where you can add code. You can add code as closures, or you can add code as more scripting. So you have the whole range from implementing the whole creation space from scratch to use at the point quite simple, but still we have a no code tool to add functionality to the creation space. But the creation space doesn't do anything at all. It's really just the rules for how you configure functionality. So when you have some personal data, then it's sensible to add that to the personal data store creation space, which handles handles access and handles how it's stored. So access is about not letting others into the creation space, but how you as an owner of creation space handles the data that are inside it. That's entirely up to you. So what happens in the creation space, that's the responsibility of the creation space, and it's also the responsibility of the creation space to resolve the contracts and making sure that unauthorized access is happening.
Yep. Cool. It's a very interesting approach, and as you said, it's going to take a while to implement. So, what's your gut feeling? Like, when can we see something like this in providing value?
Yeah, late summer. We may have some. I'm implementing a Swift package for us to play with. That has implemented some concrete implementations of different creation spaces. So you can add it in your iOS application or in a Mac application or a Swift-based application. But I'm not sure when we're ready to publish that. But I hope that will be in not too far future. So yeah, maybe late spring or something.
Yeah. So I had a question, but I forgot. Sorry.
That's okay.
But what? Okay. So, do you guys have any plans? Like, you talked about interoperability. Do you guys have any plans to try to present this to my data or diff or anywhere else? Because we can help you, of course, to get there. But there's or even solid space community to kind of hear.
Oh yeah, I think that would be super cool, because this is really an effort that requires that we all pull in the same direction. So just talking about it, let the ideas bubble. So I think that could be very good.
Maybe you guys should aim to go to IIW, which is Identity Internet Web Workshop.
Yeah.
It's the end of April in San Francisco. It's basically where it's at Microsoft, or not at Microsoft, but on the area, and a lot of the most important identity people are there. So
yeah, that would be very interesting, because as I started with it really all starts with the individual and the identity.
Yeah. Because that conference works as an open unconference, meaning that
Mm.
everyone can come and speak, and you can kind of talk about your subject and make people interested, and then people will come and listen, and then that can start creating a discussion.
Yeah,
Because
cool.
again, like nobody wants you guys to end up on an island on yourself with this solution. We want everything to work together, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. We will won't get anywhere if we are holding this to ourselves, and it's very important that everyone contributes.
Live streaming is on.
we're back. We're just gonna end our stream in a good way, not an abrupt way. We had a question there where we talked about IIW, which is one of the a really big conference where a lot of important people, players come, and potentially kind of talk about this in an open space to see how the response is, like how solid is implementing, how this diverges or even converges with solid in any kind of way. So yeah, any last comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's a superb tip because we don't expect that we have all the answers for how this is going to be in the end. We have started we touching or scratching a bit at the surface, but this is for the long haul. So we need to get out there, speak with others, inspire each other, and then end up with the right solution.
Yeah, sounds good. But thanks a lot for coming, and I think it was a really great presentation. Brought a lot of good thoughts, and I'm excited to see how it goes. So we'll stop the live stream for now and just have a normal conversation.